Everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dojo Live. I am Tulio Sergusa, broadcasting from Southern California. I want to welcome today my co-host, Kim Lantis, who is in
Hello.
our offices in Hermosillo, Mexico. Hi, Kim. Good to see
Hi,
you again.
Julia. Thank you.
And let's not forget our wonderful guests that we have joining us today. We have Herrmann and Kimberly Sullivan. Hi, guys. Welcome to Dojo Live.
Hello, I like your name, Kimberly.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. The Kimberlys are taking over.
Yes. It's Kimberly. It's a Kim attack here. That's fantastic. We are excited to speak with you today, especially with the topic that we're going to be covering. But before we do that, we'd like to get to know you a little bit. So if you can take the time to just introduce yourself, let the audience know who you are. Let's start with you, Anne, and then continue to Kimberly, and we'll kick off the conversation right after that.
Fantastic. So Anne Herrmann, I am the author of a book called The Whole Brain Business Book, and have been looking at the brain for most of my life. So I grew up with a father who wired me up to the EEG for testing, and it all started there. And some people say that explains how I turned out. I also did two TED Talks. One was the one thing you need to know about your brain that will change your life. And then a few years later, did another one that speaks to think like your future depends on it, because it does. So I'm fascinated by all things brain, all things learning. I've got 2 young grandkids, and I just can't wait to see them, because every day I can sort of watch the neurons firing in their brains as they learn about life. So that's about me. I've been running this company for many years, and still loving it.
Welcome to the show, Anne. We're excited to speak with you. And Kimberly, please tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having us. My name's Kimberly, and I like to think of myself as an empathy-first people leader. I love to create the best possible workspaces for talent, and really drive to build engaging cultures in particularly remote environments as of late. So that's been my main focus. And I've been kind of riding the startup world since the beginning of my career. I really enjoy getting into environments where you can have a vast impact on not only the growth of your talent, but also the growth of the work environment that you are creating. And then outside of work, I am the chairperson of a nonprofit that helps to support foster youth in Northeast Ohio, and I'm a proud Cleveland, Ohio resident.
Excellent. So, Anne, you're the Chief Innovation Officer and Chairwoman for Herrmann, correct?
Chief Thought Leader,
Chief Thought Leader.
Because we're in the thinking business, so we thought Thought Leader would kind of fit.
I love it. I like it. And Kimberly, you serve as the VP of People and Talent, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right, fantastic. Tell us a little bit about Herrmann. What's the purpose of the company? What kind of clients you serve? What do you guys do?
Well, we have a platform that is designed to help people unlock their thinking potential, what we call their cognitive diversity. And as I mentioned earlier, we've been looking at the brain and thinking for many, many years. And what's really exciting for me is that we've now moved this to a technology platform that allows people to get access to insights around why it is that I might be thinking so completely different than my colleague, and maybe getting a little frustrated about that, or why it is that my most recent plan or communication just fell flat. So we, through the power of an understanding of our research and the model, help people get access to something that's often pretty complex, neuroscience, in a way that is very accessible, very easy to apply, and can make a difference in their lives every single day.
That's amazing. I was introduced to neuroscience about 12 years ago by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Bob Irwin, who has since passed, and fell in love with it. It has shaped a lot of my thinking around cognitive and brain function. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Kim, what's the topic of conversation today? Let's just go right into it.
Sure. Thank you, Tulio, and thank you for being here, Anne and Kimberly. Today's topic is idea to software as a service. leading brand evolution as a female entrepreneur. So I'm assuming here, Anne, you're going to tell us about the genesis of Herrmann and discussing particularly the resilience and adaptability side, how to not lose the magic of your idea while evolving to in the ever-changing world around us, particularly the world of 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how about it? What's the history of Herrmann? You told us a little bit about what you do. What's the story of going from your idea to the actual software as a service?
Well, it's interesting. So we're actually a third generation family business. So my father started the company. The work actually was initially developed at GE, for GE. And then I came in as the second generation leader, so daughter of, which was always kind of interesting because I had lived in France for about 15 years and was an entrepreneur there and had already experienced what it was kind of like to be a young technology-oriented female entrepreneur in a world that didn't quite know what to do with that. And so when I came back to work with my father and then take the role at the time of CEO, I knew we needed to move from what was really a business that ran workshops on how people think, but it was very much a hands-on, face-to-face seminar business. And so we moved a lot to a platform. We were able to get partners like IBM and others to help us make that happen. And it was constant pivoting through recessions, through challenges that were unforeseen, through technology that wasn't quite ready yet. And needing to also just navigate funding challenges. All of that was part of it. And then I finally got to a place about 6 years ago where it became really clear to me that I needed some fresh thinking to help us take it to the next level. And so Kareem Morganady, who's now CEO of the company, now running the company, my eldest son came on board, and his vision of really taking us to the SaaS platform was really, I think, so timely. It was different than anybody else was doing in our space. And still is, but it allowed us to then say, how do we really scale this? And the true vision all along was to get this powerful insight to the world, to as many thinkers around the world as we could. But what was limiting us was scale. So, taking that and moving it from something that was paper to then something that was digital but not scalable to now something that is digital and widely scalable has been that journey. But the essence is still there. The essence of the power of an individual thinker and what they can bring to the table and the potential that we all have to be more whole-brained in our thinking. And most people just kind of assume that what I got is what I got, right? And we make it very clear that there's so much more available to you. And we do it in a way that's very friendly and very accessible.
So you just mentioned something, whole brain thinking. What is that?
Well, part of what emerged from our initial research, I mentioned the EEG stuff a few minutes ago, was a model that is a powerful model that shows that we have 4 cognitive modes, and those are pretty easy to understand. You might think about that person and maybe it's you that's more analytical and just loves breaking things down and is always asking the question, what? That's one cognitive mode. We also have a very practical mode that loves details and structure and planning and getting things done. Maybe you can relate to the relational mode, which is all about other people and the who question and really connecting with others. It's that person who can look across the room and sort of sense what's going on with somebody else. Kimberly is one of those people. You're one of those people. All right. And then finally, the entrepreneurial world knows a lot about experimental thinkers. And those are people who see the big picture, start from the end and go backwards to the beginning, are great at concepts, new ideas, and really thinking ahead of the time. So we all have access to all 4 of these. What is critical to know is that we have preferences for some over others. And once you understand those preferences, you can begin to say, okay, how are my preferences really helping me get where I want to go? And then how might I be a prisoner of my preferences? And maybe I have some blind spots I need to address. So we help people see both and then look at ways that they can stretch beyond what their kind of normal thinking preferences might be to get to where they want to go, to better communicate, make decisions, and solve problems. So the whole brain model, in essence, is that depiction of those 4 cognitive modes. And it's easy to understand and easy to remember.
Your 4 cognitive modes are actually reminding me of Gary Chapman's 5 love languages. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Yeah, I see kind of some overlap there. Obviously, the application's a bit different, but the fact that we are kind of all capable of speaking each mode, although we have a preference for the other. And if we want to be able to best communicate, we have to sort of, I'm guessing, identify the mode of those that we're communicating with and try to adapt accordingly.
Absolutely. And part of what's interesting about our research and that TEDx talk I talked about, which is the one thing you need to know about your brain that will change your life, is that the brain is designed to really pay most attention to patterns. We get, we're really kind of lazy. Our brains are really kind of go with whatever you're most familiar with, and you just kind of lock and load with that. And it means that we really don't have to expend as much effort. So what's important to recognize first is, what are those patterns? And because without paying attention, that's where we'll go. And then I like to talk about having those stop and think moments where we think, wait a minute, is this thinking really the right thinking for the situation? How do I be more agile as a thinker? How does my leader be more agile? How do we as a company become more agile in our thinking so that we can meet the needs of the situation at hand? Because we all can flex, but it takes energy, motivation, and you need to know what your starting place is so that you can know where to go to.
Okay, so clearly some of us have a propensity towards one of the 4 modes, right? But that doesn't mean we can't tap into each one as needed. I'm reminded of Carl Jung's archetypes, right? I mean, just because you are naturally the magician doesn't mean you can't tap into, when you need to, the warrior energy or the lover energy or the king-queen energy, right? To accomplish various tasks in your life. We can have a whole conversation about those archetypes and the mature and the immature models, etc. But my question specifically to your whole brain thinking model, how has that shaped the trajectory in building your business, your own business as entrepreneurs? How are you using that in-house? How's that shaping your trajectory as an entrepreneur?
Well, I'll start, and then I'm going to let Kimberly add on to what it is that we're currently doing today. One of the things that we do know, to just be super clear, we have something called the HBDI, the Herrmann Brain Dominance Instrument, which is the assessment that was originally developed at GE. So we have over 2 million profiles in our database. So what we have discovered is that actually most people have 2 preferences. Or 3. Some have 1, and then a very small percentage have all 4. And what that means is that we are really designed to be able to shift. So for me, what was most interesting, having grown up on this stuff, was when I first looked at starting the company, it all became clear to me. I sort of understood what my father had been working on, but when I began to encounter challenges and hurdles and I had ideas that other people didn't understand, it was like, oh, right. Okay, so I am in that experimental mode and other people aren't seeing it. They're not getting it. So I've used this throughout my career as a way to begin to understand the implications of what we're trying to do. And, we're really lucky because as we interact with others, our clients, our partners, we have this common language that we can use to accelerate our understanding, to not trip over each other. And one of the things that I love most about what we're doing now and what Kimberly's leading at Herrmann is that we're our own laboratory. So we practice what we preach. We eat our own cooking, so to speak. And Kimberly leads that effort in terms of how we apply whole brain thinking every day at Herrmann.
Yeah, one of the reasons I was so excited to join the team was for that particular reason. It was the opportunity to join into a growing company that pivoted into this new SaaS model. So I get to not only kind of create this internal thinking lab where we can create programming around whole brain thinking for our own internal talent, but then the eventual potential for it to be productized, and that's something that we could push out to our clients. And the pair of both those things, whether it's onboarding, talent growth and development, recruiting activities, how we understand one another better and help one another stretch in our thinking. The fact that I could have my hands in both of those opportunities is really exciting.
So, Kimberly, a question. Historically, this has been the kind of thing where organizations have engaged consultants in person to come in and meet with people and spend enormous amounts of time, creating think tank groups, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right?
Mhm.
So, you guys are proposing technology can accomplish a lot of this, which is very timely, especially with COVID and how the world has changed. The idea of showing up somewhere, it's a non-starter right now, right? So how has that been a shift in thinking for the practitioners that have contributed the knowledge base, and how has that been a shift in thinking for those who are adopting these tools in their day-to-day work life? Have you guys seen challenges with that? What have those been, and how have you handled them?
Well, actually, I'll let Anne take this one because she's more engaged with the practitioners day to
Okay,
day. So I
sure.
think she'll be great with this one. Yeah.
Sure. We still do have practitioners who work with organizations, but what we realized is that at the end of the day, people are only going to use what they have available to them in their day-to-day life and day-to-day work. So you need to provide, something that's easily accessible, that's right there, that's easily integratable into some of the common tools that you're using. So our practitioners really serve as catalysts for an organization to understand how do we use this concept of whole brain thinking to work our culture. But at the individual thinker level, that's how we call everybody who completes our assessment. We call them a thinker. They can access their data. They can explore it. They can compare their data with others. They don't need a facilitator standing there to help them do that. They can, do a deeper dive. They can kind of create their own README. This is how you need to interact with me, so that somebody can look that up before they head into a meeting and be prepared, and maybe try to not frustrate that person, or better build trust. So it was a shift in mindset because I think many of our practitioners were used to playing that role, right, of being the purveyor of knowledge. And what we found is by moving a lot of that capacity into the platform, it gives the power to the thinkers.
Mm-hmm. And then internally for our own talent, we use it, right? We're using it within our own programs. We're using it before we go into meetings with one another. We have this share and compare function where you can go and look at your data compared to the person you are going to go meet with. And you can understand where are they going to come from? Where are they going to start their thinking? Where are some potential areas of conflict? And so that it's stuff that you go into the meeting already understanding, where we have a teams function where you can understand what the thinking of a team is. Where's this team going to lean? What are the things we should probably think about before we leave this meeting, because the team doesn't lean into this specific quadrant? And all of those things, it's so beautiful to watch it be so helpful internally, and then it's something that we can push out to our clients as well.
So how does that logistically work, right? So for example, you can integrate LinkedIn and other tools on your calendar so that if you're gonna have a meeting, you can get insights about the person you're gonna meet with. Salespeople use this all the time, right? But what you're suggesting is I can actually sort of get a snippet of who this person is and how they relate to other people, the world in general, which can help shape how I converse with them, or in some cases, if I have a conflict or I need to resolve a problem, how I resolve that with them. How does that actually come to play logistically with the technology and the platform?
Well, we've got integrations. We're working right now on a Gmail integration. We've got a Slack integration that allows you to call up somebody's data and then understand, and then it can nudge you to then begin to understand what you might be communicating, right? And how that communication might fit or not fit. Because, as you think about it, if you were to just review anything that you've written, for example, and see if there were clues as to how you prefer to think, you could probably find those clues versus somebody else who might be sending you a document. Kim, you want to talk a little bit about how we're looking at some of these nudges and how that's going to make a difference in the work lives of people using this inside the company?
Yeah, and that's actually kind of the unique seat that I'm in, which I love, which is we gather feedback constantly from our talent about what are other areas where they could better utilize, like what are areas where they would want to have that information.
And Kimberly, sorry for the interruption. Just
Yeah.
to shape it a little more, in the context of, for example, multinationals, right? Sometimes you can approach someone and they can get offended just by you being yourself, because there's a difference in how certain things are spoken about, right? So I'm curious to understand, in the context of multinational, environments like that, how this comes into play to facilitate not having a conflict from a basic conversation that just comes out of the differences of cultures.
Yeah, and actually, Anne interacts with a lot of our global partners, so I'll let you touch on that.
So we are a global company. So we have firsthand, and I lived overseas. The thing that works with our stuff, and I can't even say that it was the original design intent of the research, is that we give people a common language. So once you begin to understand this model, you can then say, can you step into the experimental mode with me? I just need you to go there. I know it feels really uncomfortable. Or, I believe we need some data. And we use colors in our model, which again, further facilitates people's ability to have that common language. And so what it does is it actually allows people to kind of step aside from some of those other ways that we get tripped up mentally by using the model as a way to then clarify their conversation. So I'd say one of the most powerful things about what happens with an organization that's been using this for some time is that they have this common language, which breaks down a lot of the other barriers. And so we use it all over the globe, and it certainly helped us with those challenges because they're very real. We can always fall back to sort of saying, are you saying that you think we need to focus on data? Okay. Or am I going too relational with you? Okay, I'll back off, right? And it's a non-judgmental way to say something to somebody and have them understand, oh, you're just doing it differently than I am. You're not doing it on purpose to drive me crazy.
Mm-hmm. And the piece internally, which is really positive, is we are a global company. So we do have team members in several different countries. And when you're talking about the differences amongst your thinking, it's a natural conversation to then lead into the differences amongst us in other areas. And so it helps us celebrate not only the differences in how we think, but the differences in how we engage with one another, different culturally from an inclusion and diversity perspective as well. It's a very natural segue into some of those dialogues, which then help us become more inclusive as an organization as a whole.
So it's been,
right.
it's been said,
the mantra of it's, I'm
no,
sorry,
go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just
different.
But it's interesting because it's been said that the common language, the global common language, is math. But what I'm hearing is that if you're using a whole brain thinking model, you actually can create a common language that is simply put into 4 different categories.
And thank goodness, because if it's math, then I'm screwed.
That's one of the cognitive modes. So it explains
as I'm listening, I'm like, I go into experimental mode a lot, and sometimes what I call thinking out loud. I could be in a meeting and having an experimental conversation with a group of people who are sitting there afraid to death about what I'm introducing, right?
Yep.
All I'm doing is exploring concept out loud, right? So so
but there might be
hey, come with me in this experimental mindset. It makes people relax, like, oh, so we're not doing this, actually, we're not changing this. It's just thinking out loud here.
Yes.
Am I getting this? Is that kind of...
That is such a great example, because a green thinker in that room would start thinking about, how am I going to execute on all of these ideas? Because they can't, or you haven't welcomed them into that space by acknowledging through that common language. So they're sitting there going, oh my goodness, how am I going to do all of this?
Yeah, that's totally me. I'm the problem identifier. It drives my husband crazy. He's a complete dreamer. And I'm like, yeah, but this and this and this and this. And he's like,
yeah, right. And then what happens, I've been in that mode too, is like, how the heck is that am I gonna implement that? And then what happens is you stop listening because you're so concerned about what you have to do that you're not even hearing the person.
And you've got your own talk track going on there, right? Which is happening. And in a virtual, we've been remote for several years. So we weren't remote before everybody else did, to a certain degree. In virtual environments, I tell you, the possibility for miscommunication. It's you can miscommunicate when you're sitting right next to somebody as well. So that's not just because we're at a distance. But what's been really exciting for me is to see how organizations are using this to deal with the challenges of not seeing each other, of getting onboarded to a team where I don't know anybody, I've never met them. So by using this as part of the onboarding process, suddenly I've got a common language with a group of people. I know how they think. So it's a very safe way to get introduced to a group of people who you haven't met yet and may not meet for another 6 months. So it works really well from that perspective.
As we come to the final minutes of our show today, my question for you is, what would you say to the naysayers, the people who say, oh my gosh, this sounds kind of, I don't know, time to drink the Kool-Aid, Coltic, or everybody's a doctor now, everybody's a psychiatrist or a psychologist now. What would you say the first step to like getting to that acceptance is?
Well, I would start by saying this is science-based. And so I think one of the reasons why it appeals to a lot of our corporate customers is that it came from a corporation where they were really working to solve workplace problems using science. So that is one piece of the puzzle. The other is it really is about the application. So this isn't just a kind of fun, let's go off and learn about each other kind of a deal. I think the greatest appeal is that you can apply it to solve real business problems, right? You can, cut the product development time by 10 months. You can increase your customer reach by a large percentage. So you can use this to facilitate mergers and acquisitions. So I think the real power of it for me is it goes beyond the individual piece, which is really important, but also to solving real problems that we face in business. And I think that's the biggest appeal that it has. And of course, Kimberly, what you lead us through, we're doing that every day as a leader at Herrmann. You're helping us do that every day in our own internal application.
Yeah. I would say the thing that is so wonderful about it is that it's easy to digest right away. But the ahas continue, and the awareness of self continues, and the growth continues, and the potential for stretching continues, and the partnership with people who think differently from you. Instead of finding those potential conflict situations, you actually become thinking partnerships, and how do you help one another grow, and the vulnerability that comes with it, which leads to more inclusive organizations. Like, all of those things have been so beautiful to watch them unfold since I joined the organization just over a year ago, as we've implemented this into more of our own internal programming, and then tested some new things that we can hopefully put onto the platform. So it's just very exciting to watch the awareness of self continue to grow. And there aren't a lot of things like that. And that's what I think that's where it gets so sticky, is because the growth continues.
And it works. I mean, it really does work. It's that being around for this many years, through three generations, the fact that this core idea has evolved, but endured, it really does work. So I think that's the bottom line. That's where the rubber hits the road, right?
But the core idea to you is evolution, I'm guessing.
But it's interesting, though, that most of your clients are larger enterprises. But when I think about, for example, startups, there are groups of people who have found how to work well together, and they keep sticking together and doing startups together. There's this compounding of time that happens because you just gel, right? And people just toss it off as we know each other well enough, but it's really they've just learned how to communicate well enough with each other to get things done. And there's probably a lot of value for startups to leverage this kind of technology to have a common language so that they can invite people outside of that circle, and they can get up to speed quickly and having a common way to communicate, and potentially could get to market a lot faster by using something like this and having a lot less conflict. Because let's face it, if you're a startup, you're going to have conflict, internal relationship conflicts. Okay, they come up. People are like, I was in a startup once. We had this mindset: we argued to get to the truth. It sucked arguing to get to the truth. I would have rather have this technology where we had a way to speak with each other. So kudos to you guys for doing that. Any last words of wisdom? We're up on time. For those who perhaps are having some conflicts inside their organization, people are not communicating well, or just want to get smarter about getting things done in a more organized fashion, and perhaps making everybody's life a little easier because less conflict usually creates happier workplaces, right? What kind of words of advice would you have on red flags they should look for that is an opportunity to come to you guys to leverage this technology?
Well, when you recognize that it feels like we're speaking two different languages, and lots of times people will say that, I don't even understand what you're trying to do. I don't even get it, right? And when that thing your listening shuts down immediately because you feel like, okay, I might as well be listening to someone who's speaking Greek because I don't get it, and I'm just going to come right back at it. As soon as you start to see yourself doing that, typically there is a difference in terms of your thinking approach, and so you have to stop and listen. And then say to yourself, you know what? This person's not doing this to intentionally drive me crazy. They're just using a different language, like we would assume if we were traveling abroad. They're just using a different language. I may not understand it. I may not fully have the context to get it. And how can I better get curious about that language? And so a lot of people, I recommend people take a look at that TEDx talk, and you could sit down next to somebody you're having this issue with and watch it, and you will begin to get some understanding of that. And then, of course, if you're interested in completing our assessment and so on and so forth, that then gives you much more tangible data to work with that allow you to then, have some tools that you can build off of.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you both with us today. It sounds like this is the kind of tool that should be implemented on everybody's phone, on their translator that automatically does this for all human-to-human interaction. So when you get a chance, move it from just business to everybody needs this. It sounds like it's this ultimate solution. Thanks for being with us today. We have another show tomorrow being Thursday at 1 p.m. We announced yesterday that it was canceled, but our guest somehow made it work. So we're back on at 1 p.m. tomorrow. So please join us. Until then, stay safe.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.